Avengers! Assemble.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast. I'm your director, Christian Buckley, joined as always by the Apex legend himself, Jack Martin.
Excelsior, Christian. Good to be back with you talking Marvel's Avengers. Surprisingly, a lot of stuff to talk about the week before the Next Gen and Hawkeye editions for this game.
Yeah, we have, surprisingly, like you said, a lot to talk about, and honestly, there's a chance that most of it's really positive, you know?
I hope so.
We will, of course, get to the new information regarding the big update for Marvel's Avengers next week, because it seems like March 18th is going to be a huge day for this game. And we do have some MCU talk in the back half of the show. WandaVision's Assemble documentary came out, so we have some brief thoughts on that, as well as predictions for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But before we do any of that, we will, of course, go over what's new this week with Marvel's Avengers. And Jack, before we get into Fury's report, I wanted to ask, is there any other Marvel stuff you've been doing recently? Because the past few months, Avengers has sort of been my Marvel fix, but more recently, it's not hitting the bar that I need to for Marvel consumption. So what's been on your plate recently besides Avengers and WandaVision?
Yeah, so after I finished WandaVision, I just wanted some more MCU stuff. And of course, we did a MCU Rewatch for the first iteration of the show back in 2019, 2 years ago, Christian.
Yeah, I know.
Gonna blow your mind.
It's gonna be 3.
Years.
Right?
Is it?
Wait. Oh, sorry. Infinity War was 3. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So you and I also separately did a 2018 rewatch, but not for a show. So I started one again. I'm doing just the release order. And I am pretty much through phase 2 at this point. I only have Ant-Man left.
Nice.
Of course, Ant-Man serves as the palate cleanser at the end of the phases. So, got through Age of Ultron. Did you want me to run through my re-ranking here?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I have 11 movies here. I'm not including Ant-Man. Ant-Man would probably be towards the bottom. Not that it's a bad movie, I just don't like it as much. But at number 11 is The Incredible Hulk. At number 10, Thor The Dark World. Number 9, Iron Man 2. Number 8, Thor. Number 7, Iron Man. Number 6, Iron Man 3. Number 5, The Avengers Age of Ultron. Number 4, The Avengers. Number 3, Captain America The First Avenger. Number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy. And number 1, Captain America The Winter Soldier.
Hell yeah, that is an excellent ranking.
Some things that have shifted. In my previous ranking, I had Age of Ultron above The Avengers. Didn't hit for me when I watched it last night, so Avengers is back above. And Captain America The First Avenger, surprisingly, has aged beautifully.
Yeah, dude.
I think it's because the arc we get with Captain America, you just go back and see it happen. Just stuck with me a little bit more. So that's my favorite Phase 1 movie. What about you? You've been watching these movies.
Yeah, so my girlfriend and I decided to do timeline order because we've never watched it that way, which is mostly the same. There's a few notable differences. Like, I've already watched Captain Marvel. I'm only a couple movies in. So I've watched The First Avenger, Captain Marvel, Iron Man 2. I have Incredible Hulk ranked. I haven't watched it yet. I have to watch that by myself because I know she does not want to watch it. But
That's fair.
So currently, last place I have Incredible Hulk. 4th place is Iron Man 2. 3rd is Captain Marvel. 2nd is Iron Man, which surprised me not having it at number 1. And number 1 is Captain America The First Avenger, because I agree with
Hell
you.
Yeah.
That movie is pretty good.
It feels classic.
Yeah, it's weird.
In a way that I didn't anticipate on this rewatch, because my thought of it beforehand was like, oh yeah, it's a fun Marvel movie, right? It's like mid-tier sort of Marvel. I don't know. Something about it just made it feel like a really classic action-adventure movie, and that really stuck with me.
Yeah. I think alongside that, my biggest shock so far is that Captain Marvel really does feel like a Phase 1 movie. In like a surprisingly authentic way. I don't think that's a bad thing about it. I just think like it fits so well with these early movies, which is just surprising considering it's one of the more recent ones. But
yeah, I think Marvel sometimes struggles with like the setup movies or like the, I guess, origin stories for their characters. Like, I don't think except for Guardians, I don't think any like origin movie is like placed high for me. I'm not including Black Panther because that's not necessarily an origin story, but
Right.
yeah, I'm with you there. That movie has sort of fallen for me throughout the couple of years since it released, but I think it's still a good movie.
Yeah, I think it's good. Like, most of the MCU, I think, is good. I don't think there's really any, like, bad movies. Like, there's some that aren't great, but, yeah. I'm curious to see how the rest of it shakes out. And, of course, we'll probably update it as the phases go on here. But, why don't we dive into Avengers for the week, Marvel's Avengers, that is, with Fury's report. This week, if you want to hop into the game, if you're grinding out these characters to level 50, because...
Like me.
Yeah, we'll get to it, but I absolutely dove back in. The low power level is Condition Green, which is the Hulk Iconic Quest. If you're hoping to level up somebody, I think Hulk has to be on the team at that point, so consider your options if you're doing this one. High power level is Up from the Depths, which is that really cool Black Widow mission that, like, gives you a completely new area in, like, Canada. Do you remember that?
Kind of.
It was
I
like
think so.
there was like an underwater base that like rose out of the ocean or something, and then you just have to go down all these deep layers.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like such a distinct hallway from like all the aim stuff. Like, I keep forgetting that mission's in the game, but it was a standout for me when I first played it, I thought.
Yeah. It's sad because those standout areas are oftentimes locked behind a high or low power level. So you, like, if you'd want to replay that, you really can't. So
Yeah.
that's kind of sad.
The Harm Room Challenge for the week will net you Captain America number 313 from 1986. And Jack, what's up with the marketplace this week?
Yeah. So there's a few things. So overall, they kind of did a reskin of the marketplace in a way. Did you notice this?
I did, yeah.
So instead of just popping in and seeing like a couple skins up top and then there's some nameplates and stuff, it's mostly all skins when you first pop into the marketplace. You have like the legendaries up top and then you have some on the bottom. I noticed all the ones I had on the bottom I just already had. I don't know if that was just me having all of those or whatever it was, but yeah. So on a base level, they sort of redesigned how the marketplace actually looks.
Yeah.
In terms of standouts, we have here the Ironman Promethium armor, which is essentially like fire truck red Iron Man, right? And he has these two like little things sticking out of his shoulders. Skinny Iron Man in a way, or like there's skinny Iron Man, there's like in the mid between, and then there's like the bigger Iron Man. He's like in the in between state in this Promethium armor. Not necessarily something I would get, but I think it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I like it. I again, I know it's a comic accurate skin. It's cool that they're continuing that trend. I think it's interesting that I feel like more often than not when we go over the marketplace, the ones that get, visually distinctive skins is Iron Man, which I guess would make sense, because that's his thing. He has a new armor, like, every time he shows up to sell toys. Like, even the comics do that, right? But
yeah,
I thought it was a cool looking one. I did see on Twitter this week, some people were bringing back up the Tetsuya Nomura like Play Arts Kai figures of Marvel characters that Square Enix produces and sells through their Play Arts line, and those have character designs for like Iron Man and Captain America and Spider-Man from Tetsuya Nomura, who designs a bunch of Final Fantasy characters. He designed the entire Final Fantasy VII cast. He designs all the Kingdom Hearts characters. Like, he has a very nice style, And I think it's just so interesting because this suit gets close. That's why I bring this up. This Promethium suit reminds me of his design for Iron Man, which again, I am so surprised they just haven't had him come over or send over some designs and then just make skins out of him or just scan those toys because like they're really distinctive and they're cool looks for these characters. So they already own the rights to them. That's the other thing because it's Square. So like I hope that after all these weeks of momentum with more and more comic accurate skins that we do start to look towards other avenues, including the MCU and for me and the Final Fantasy dorks out there like myself, the Tetsuya Nomura designs.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, go for it. With those pre-existing designs from the Final Fantasy artists, like what you said, and also just, I'm a big Apex Legends shill, of course. Yes. We all know this.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I would say if the artists at Square Enix and Crystal just want to like get funky with some designs, like make their own. I think that'd be really cool to see, especially around seasonal holidays. Like put a jack-o'-lantern on Iron Man's head. It's gonna be cool.
Yeah. The other thing I noted also was the skins that you said for some reason you think you already had. That entire bottom row was the pre-order skins. You know, the classic looks for the characters that you only got if you pre-ordered.
Mm-hmm.
So we've reached a point 6 months post-launch where they've decided to list those. I'll say the highlight, I think, out of that group, I really like the Hulk skin there because it's the purple pants and like the tattered, shredded lab coat, like just hanging on Hulk's shoulders. I really like that skin.
Yeah, I think I immediately put that on him because I was like, I need a green Hulk.
Yeah, I did
because that was like hard to come by at first, and I was like, okay, this is the only one, so here we go.
Yeah, and it's like it's a green. It's not like a muted olive green like the standard Hulk is in that game, right? It's like you got that Hulk pop. I appreciate it.
Yeah, saturation up to 120%.
Exactly. Zack Snyder nowhere to be found around that skin. No. Well, why don't we dip into some stark realities for Marvel's Avengers? Because as we teased earlier at the top of the show, next week, March 18th, is seeming to be a huge day for Marvel's Avengers, Jack. And I believe it might be a make-or-break day for this game.
Yes. Cautiously optimistic about what's to come. I think there's two definite things to look forward to, of course, with Next Gen and Hawkeye coming out that day. But we also got a little tease for what's to come. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, we do have why don't we start with this? Because this like puzzled you. I remember you texted me. You're like, why didn't they say this last week? The campaign replay is also going live on March 18th. So that is launching in tandem with Hawkeye, the Next Gen update, as well as all these changes to XP. You will be able to do, I don't know if they're framing it as New Game Plus or if it's going to just be a standard start from wherever again, but you will be able to play the Reassemble campaign once again as of next week.
Right. So, yeah, like what you said, last week I was very confused why that just wasn't a feature they were going to include with the Next Gen version. Turns out it is. I think my thinking behind this, and we were talking about the XP changes from last week and how that was like a big communications push and describing what that would be like. And we were immediately afterwards, we found out through a developer live stream that, or like a few days after that, the campaign would be replayable on March 18th. And we were like, why focus on the XP and not focus on that? Eventually they did. It was just a confusing mess. So it's good to see that that's coming in. My thought process of why they didn't announce that earlier is that probably came down to the wire and they got it done just in time. Because I don't see why you wouldn't have announced that at the Hawkeye war table. I think that work was just being done down to the last minute and they got it in. So good on them. I will probably be replaying that at some point in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I probably will too, because I do love a lot of the moments from that story. The other thing that was teased, and I believe leaked through like some sponsorship thing, custom harm rooms have been confirmed to be coming next week with, again, this whole wave of updates. The way you're going to be able to customize them, I believe it's sort of how the Harm Room Challenge weekly sort of features different modifiers and things like that. It doesn't seem like you can change it to make it like an infinite horde mode like a lot of people would like to see from the game, but it's a step. You're still going to be able to earn XP from this, I think, but you won't be earning any like boost. There's no way to like, you know how sometimes with level creators you can make it so like you'll just earn like 10 million XP.
Yeah,
You're not going to be able to do that.
right. It's not a Tony Hawk Pro Skater situation.
No,
where
that's
you can just
exactly what I
grind
was
for
thinking.
5 minutes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what came to mind.
Yep.
But what do you think about this? Because I know you and I briefly discussed this off air because this leaked a couple weeks ago and it seemed inconsequential. Now that it's official, do you have any other thoughts about it?
It's not something I was necessarily looking for. It's a nice addition.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I can boost some challenge card stuff in here. That would be something that would make me really excited.
Mm-hmm.
Because typically with Marvel's Avengers, they'll announce something, whether it's the game or a DLC or something, and then we don't necessarily know what it actually is going to be like until we
Right.
get our hands on it. So this is another one of those situations where I don't know what this is actually going to look like until I mess around with it on March 18th. But if I could jump in, change some modifiers, maybe even specify what enemies I want to be facing off against, and I could bring in Hawkeye and do some challenge card stuff in there, that's cool. That would get me in every day.
Yeah, what's interesting though, Jack, I'm trying to fact check this. I feel like I read like Gene Park or somebody talking about this, and I think they said that for some reason the custom harm rooms you can't play multiplayer,
Yeah, that's
which
true.
is baffling. Because like I've played with one of my friends from home. I played Avengers a couple times, and when we do play, it's like, hey, you just want to knock out some harm room stuff to like level these characters. So it's just baffling. I don't get it.
It's a single player game, Christian.
It is. It's a single player game. You want to play with your friends? Too bad. Go play Fortnite.
Yeah,
Oh man. But
which has a better roster of Marvel characters at this point.
yeah, it really does. But another thing that has come into the stars aligning for March 18th being a huge day for Marvel's Avengers is a new presentation series from Square Enix debuting again on March 18th. It is Square Enix Presents, a recurring series that will be seen throughout this year. You made the astute observation that the advertising for this looks like a concert announcement.
Yeah, this looks like a Boston Calling poster. It looks
Absolutely.
really cool, or like a Coachella poster.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick before we dive into this, what is it with next week? Why is everything coming out next week?
I don't know, dude. I don't know.
It's like how a couple weeks ago there was just news on that one day about everything that's happening next week, but like content is dropping. It's bizarre.
Yeah, because what we got Hawkeye, we got the next gen update, we got this Square presentation, we got the Snyder Cut, we got Falcon and Winter Soldier. I think there's probably more stuff, but it's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So, what I do appreciate about the announcement of this is that they're being pretty transparent about what to expect there on a Square side. It seems like it is focused on their Western titles, like Tomb Raider's 25th anniversary is going to be present here. Outriders is going to show up. Marvel's Avengers is on this roster. I think Square Enix Montreal is supposed to show a new project.
Yeah, they're debuting the next Life is Strange as well.
Yes. So, and they've also given a runtime, 40 minutes or 50 minutes, I think. But
Yep.
that's what to expect, right? And so on one level, it's like, hey, good communication, you're getting this out there. But we see Marvel's Avengers on this list, Jack, and I'm sure very much you had the same reaction. My mind was racing. What the hell are we going to see here?
Yeah.
It seems like the way they're phrasing it is, well, the direct phrasing is see what's next for Marvel's Avengers at this presentation.
I actually think it's what's to come because I wanted to make sure I got the phrasing right
Okay.
because I think what's next and what's to come are two very different things.
You are absolutely right. Those are two very different sentiments on a marketing lingo.
Yeah, because part of my initial thought of at first I thought it was what's next, but I think it is what's to come. Yeah, it's okay. I have the tweet pulled up here. Tune in, Square Enix, blah blah blah, for a look at what's to come. Okay, so what's to come, I think, implies multiple things, or I think it implies a strategy of content release.
Okay.
And I think it's a bigger, grander scheme than hopefully just, hey, here's the Spider-Man DLC. Because that's where my mind went first. I was like, they're going to get us excited and they're just going to show off Spider-Man. I think hopefully this is the Wakanda raid or some sort of substantive multiplayer content.
I am inclined to believe that because one, I did first my reaction was okay, Black Panther raid, of course, and then I was like, well, it could be Spider-Man. If Miller's accurate with their information, which I would be inclined to believe that based on their track record, Spider-Man's next. But I do wonder if Spider-Man would be reserved for like a state of play or something. Maybe like a tease, because again, the way this game's been marketed has been very strange. So maybe like we lead with a tease for Spider-Man, and it's like, okay, we'll see you at some state of play at some point. But I do think there's a chance we see Black Panther finally, because again, that was supposed to be September when they showed it and revealed it. An announcement of the raid, whatever else that's been working on under the surface. Like, I don't want to say a roadmap, but I think there's a chance for what's to come that we could see, like, hey, Black Panther's coming to the game. Maybe 2 weeks later, we're adding this Wakanda expansion to explore his character and give him a story. And it ties into a raid prep or something along those lines. I'm inclined... I don't want to get my hopes up, but I think that is likely, because what's to come implies like something we don't know yet, right? Hawkeye's going to be out that day. Presumably the update is happening at noon the latest, and this event is a couple hours later, so I don't think they'd be like, what's to come, let's talk about Hawkeye again, like.
Yeah. This implies, of course, what's to come in the future, and I don't think we would get a roadmap per se, but I have a feeling we get a couple things. Whether that's Spider-Man and Black Panther, or if they just want to take Black Panther and separate it as you're getting the Black Panther story content and his character, as well as the raid, and treat that as separate things. And then maybe say, after this raid, we're going to have more raids to come. Like this is the next step for Marvel's Avengers, and we're introducing that with Black Panther in the raid. I think that's where my mind goes. I think that's the most, like, when I think of what's to come for Marvel's Avengers, it has to be Black Panther at this point, right? It's been teased and leaked for a while now, so that has to be coming very soon. So I would hope it's that. And I think I would probably forgive them for not talking about it in the Hawkeye War Table, because if this was in place when it was, that would make sense for them to hold off on it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that because obviously this didn't, they didn't come up with Square Enix Presents overnight, I think they did a similar event either over the summer last year or an E3 or two back. Like, they're no stranger to having their own event. So, like, I think in this post, or like leaning towards post-COVID age of like, hey, we're still acclimating to everything, they want to have this safety net of like, hey, Square Enix Presents should be a label for us, like Sony has State of Play. So, like, this is not an idea they just came up with, I don't think.
Right.
And
yeah, this has been brewing for a few months, probably.
Exactly. So, regardless of how it met expectations or not, I think Avengers was one of the biggest games of last year, right? Like I think that's accurate to say.
Yeah, in terms of conversation, 100%.
Yeah, in terms of like conversation, marketing, initial reception, like there's a lot of factors where it did, and it still broke sales records. It's just a matter of like living up to what Square was projecting.
Right.
I think you want to have something from one of your biggest launches of 2020 in your, you know, christening of this series, right? Like you want to have something to represent as much of your titles as possible. And I don't know if the choice for that to represent Marvel's Avengers would be, hey, you own a PlayStation, this is what you're getting, right? Like I feel like they'd probably want to service the greater community, and I think since Black Panther's been like MIA basically since September, we're all expecting him to show up randomly. It would make sense. That's like, okay, now show him, even if he's not coming until after Spider-Man, just say, hey, what's to come? Black Panther, a raid, multiplayer content, and a promise of, hey, we'll see what happens next. We're listening to the community still, and we're reworking gear. Hopefully by the end of year one, we'll have a big 2.0 update, like that kind of thing, right? Like I think those expectations, while we were burned at the Hawkeye presentation, right now they're not really painting expectations anyway, so I think it's more fair to have those now.
So, what makes you walk out of this excited and pleased, and what makes you walk out of this disappointed?
If it's just Spider-Man, I think I'll still be happy because I love Spider-Man, and being able to play as Spider-Man in this game will make me excited. But I know that's not what this game needs right now. Like long term, seeing Peter Parker Spider-Man in this game is not what I want or what the community wants, to like make us happy. I think to make me happy and feel good walking out of this presentation, I need to see the raid. Or just like, you don't have to like show me the gameplay of the raid, I guess, but just like a cinematic maybe of like T'Challa fighting people, and then Tony Stark's next to him and they're just blasting away stuff, and then they see Claw and it's like the Mines of Wakanda raid coming in June or something, like some representation of a huge multiplayer raid with Black Panther and a window, as well as I think maybe throwing another character to us of just like, hey, this is the next on the docket. Don't know when it's going to be ready, but like Carol or She-Hulk or something like that. I think on that level, I'll be satisfied.
Yeah,
what
100%. I think I'm with you. If it was just Spider-Man, I would feel very disappointed. I don't think that's likely now that I think about it. And yeah, I think you're right. They would probably do either State of Play or just their own War Table for that. This, I think there'll be more eyes on it because it is just the greater Square Enix lineup rather than just like a very focused audience. So I think I would be happy if they detailed Black Panther and Wakanda and the raid in substantive way. I'm thinking it's probably going to be a like 3 to 4 minute trailer or something like that. Because they are confined by the 40-minute runtime of this whole thing.
Right.
So I don't think we get like a talking head being like, hey, it's me from... although this could be a possibility. It could be someone saying, hey, it's me from Crystal Dynamics. Here's what we're working on. I think it's probably more like just a trailer. And then a disembodied voice saying, get the Wakanda raid at this point in time. And then that's it. I think it'll be rather short, but I'm hoping for at least multiplayer, and that for me would make me happy in the form of the Wakanda raid.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the point of like there's more eyes here, because that's just factual, right? Like I don't know what the numbers are for those live premieres of the War Tables. Like you and I are there immediately, of course, but I think despite this being an Avengers game, in terms of the games industry, there's a lot of Tomb Raider fans that are going to see like, hey, what's up with Lara Croft's 25th anniversary? Meanwhile, while they're watching this, you want to show there's reasons to be excited about this Avengers game, right? So, and I think it's like that for a handful of other fans of all these other Square properties being shown off. You want to sell Avengers, and I think what you're saying is correct. Like, you want to show something that promises, like, hey, this game does have content. This game does have reasons to play with your friends. It does have a future. And well, I think at this point, the minimum would be to make me like happy and feel good would be Black Panther and the Raid. And I think you would maybe sell people with that too, because everybody loves Black Panther, right? Like, if you have an average fan of Tomb Raider who like sees Black Panthers coming to this game, and there's going to be this huge expansion, like that's an enticing thing, especially if this game is like $20 right now. I do hope that because there's all these eyes and because they haven't shied away from just like confirming things, it would be nice if we get one more little thing of like, hey, this is who's next. It's not coming for a while, but here's a little tease, like the way that we got that Black Panther medallion tease, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's entirely possible we get that trailer and then maybe like a 5-second tease of someone.
Yes.
Like walking out of the shadows or something. That'd be cool. My mindset is I wasn't expecting this at all. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they had this in the works. And that's probably why we didn't hear anything about the future of the game when they announced or when they did the Clint war table.
Right.
So I think this has the potential to alleviate my fears about this future of the game. At the same point, in a lesser state, I don't think this will actually happen, but this could also just double down my fears on this game. If they just come out and talk about Spider-Man, and like what we've been saying, there are more eyes on this, and who's the most beloved Marvel character? Spider-Man. And they just put this out there, a tone-setting Spider-Man trailer for this game. Buy it on PlayStation. Best place to play. And that's it. I would feel pretty burned by that, to be completely honest. But I'm hopeful that won't happen.
Do you think that's worst case scenario?
Yeah, because I think like true worst case scenario would be them just talking about Hawkeye, which I don't think they would do.
Yeah, me either.
Like what you said. But yeah, I think worst case scenario would be either Spider-Man or a character with no substantive multiplayer content, because then that would just confirm that this game is just a complete single player game at this point.
Yeah, and hearing you say that, I really doubt that's what we'd get, but I feel
Right.
like, there's a world. I think there is a world where maybe they do just be like, hey, Hawkeye's out. I think there's a chance. It's not a large chance. It's like a less than 5% chance, but yeah, I guess keep expectations in check, but I think it's fair to have high hopes for this, especially after that last war table was, I think partly on us for expecting more out of it, because they did come out and say like, hey, we're covering XYZ, and we're like, but also this, right?
Yeah. Mephisto.
Yeah, exactly. But here it really, unless they like put out some expectation setters this week, then yeah, hope for the best next week. And maybe by the next time we're talking Marvel's Avengers for next week's episode, we have a chunky conversation about this Wakanda raid and this horde mode that's coming to the game alongside, like that'd be exciting.
Yeah, and I'll also be talking about the next gen version, hopefully, and some initial Hawkeye impressions. So regardless, it should be a big week next week for the show.
Absolutely, because we're also going to be having some MCU talk next week. Because meanwhile, we got a lot going on the front of Marvel Studios.
Oh yeah.
First up, I wanted to just do a shout out here. Do you look at set photos often?
I don't go out of my way, but they do pop up on my Twitter timeline.
Sure, and I'm sure you saw like the Star-Lord Love and Thunder stuff of like there's some Guardians. You probably saw those pictures a while ago.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. New ones this week stumble their way onto my timeline. Specifically, it was Natalie Portman. She
Hell yeah.
is built right now.
Yeah. I was
She,
very happy to see that.
yeah, those
I did not
arms, dude.
Yeah, like throughout Natalie Portman's career, she has largely remained that sort of same stature that she's always been.
Hmm.
And yeah, like she looks real good.
Hmm.
She is incredibly muscular right now, and it's looking like she's. I mean, it's kind of confirmed that she's going to be taking the mantle of Thor, or in some way or another.
Yeah,
So she is definitely building her physique to match that. Incredibly impressed. I was like, wow,
I
I
know.
did not expect that.
Yeah, I saw the pictures. I was like, Jesus Christ, that is Thor. Like that is
Yeah.
that's exciting. I can't wait for that movie, man. That's gonna be such a good time.
What an excellent title, Love and Thunder.
I know. Plus, like, I know we like briefly breezed over it, but like seeing Thor with like the bright blue pants and like the 80s hair and like the band shirt from those set photos and like Star Lord with the same sort of getup, like, oh man, it's gonna be so good.
I was as I was doing my rewatch of like Phase 1 and Phase 2, you get the sense that those directors didn't have as much agency
Hmm.
as new directors do in these phases, as I think Marvel has been more comfortable with giving more of the reins to directors to have their own tone.
Yeah.
And Taika Waititi is definitely one of those directors. And it seems like with his second project, he probably will also have more say into what happens in that movie. So I'm excited for his tone to return and
Hmm.
just more of his direction. So that's gonna be exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait for Love and Thunder. But what's surprising, Jack, I've seen this week a lot of people sharing that I believe it was 2019 Phase 4 lineup,
Hmm.
and it's sad, man. It's sad seeing that in
With all the
hindsight.
dates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cuz like WandaVision was supposed to be like the fifth project of Phase 4.
Yeah. Um, I think that put them a in a bad, not a bad spot, but like in a it gave expectations to that show that didn't necessarily deserve it, because
Hmm.
even we thought about it this way. There, it's like, wow, they rescheduled this for the first Phase 4 project. This must have really big implications on the greater Marvel universe, and it
Hmm.
necessarily didn't really have those.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting that that was intended to be like somewhere like sandwiched in the middle of Phase 4.
Yeah, because the other thing too is I think WandaVision was supposed to be, gosh, when was it? I think it was like maybe December of 2020, and then March of 21 is when we were going to get, I think, Multiverse of Madness. So that would have been like an immediate payoff of that post credits, right? But
Right.
gotta wait a year now. I think originally Love and Thunder, since we're talking about that, I think that was supposed to be like in November of 21 also. Like it's strange. It's sad, but what we have right now with WandaVision, I think was definitely welcome, you know. So,
Yeah, I'm glad we got WandaVision when we did. I think it was
mhm,
a really good tone setter for Phase 4.
absolutely. So, speaking of that, Assembled, the Marvel Studios documentary series, debuted this week, and I watched it. I know you watched it.
Mm-hmm.
It is covering WandaVision for their first installment of Assembled, which, first off, I like that name for the docu series.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm this is episode 1 of Assembled, so I imagine every project going forward will just have an episode or whatever ones they want to do it for, like The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I would. I think we touched on this when it was announced, but I would really love if we can like cobble together some retrospective ones also, because one of my favorite things from this assembled episode on WandaVision was seeing Paul Bettany in the booth for Iron Man. That was really cool.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. We got him with John Favreau. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that was really cool to see.
Yeah, because I feel like specifically with the Phase 1 Marvel content, we don't really have a lot of insight into how it came together, you know, how it was assembled, but
Right.
I feel like
I
that would
would
be super fun.
I would love a grandiose MCU documentary not developed by Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of my issues with documentaries like this, where they are sort of self-produced, is that they tend to be clean and shiny, and they never discuss like any issues that have happened. I didn't expect any issues to pop up with a behind-the-scenes documentary like this, but I think an example of a documentary that I love is The Director and the Jedi, about The Last Jedi. And I think that was produced by Disney, but it was a lot more candid than I was expecting. Like Mark Hamill was talking about how he totally disagreed with Rian Johnson, and they really delved into that. So I would just love a Infinity Saga documentary. What happened? Who were some of the players that we lost? Why? Like I think Patty Jenkins, that would be an interesting topic to cover. I don't think they would ever talk about that in like a Disney produced Infinity Saga documentary. So that'd be really cool.
Sure, yeah. Plus, like going through phase one, I'm sure you've noticed this, and we talked about it originally in the first run of Excelsior. Just like phase one feels so different, and I completely forgot that the initial batch of movies were produced by Paramount,
Yeah.
which is like such a different studio, right? Like obviously Kevin Feige still was like the main guy back then and is now, but yeah, just like I'm so curious. Even if they had to break it up by phases, I would love to see any sort of documentary about that. Because like I know Avengers had one about like assembling a universe that came with like my Target Blu-ray of Avengers.
Yeah.
It's not too expansive and thorough, but I think for how unprecedented this entire universe is, I would love behind the scenes stuff about it because what we do have is not enough to satiate my interests, I think, in how it's produced.
Yeah, totally.
So, but in terms of the WandaVision assembled episode, there was a big focus, I think, rightly so, on the first episode that takes place in the 50s, the Dick Van Dyke inspired episode, and the fact that it was, in fact, shot in front of a live studio audience, which I thought was great.
Yeah, that was probably the standout new piece of info from this documentary. I had no clue that people actually showed up to watch that production.
Yeah.
People showed up in like 1950s attire, and
Yeah, that was good.
people behind the cameras and production crew were all wearing 1950s attire. So yeah, you're right. Like they did mostly focus on that one for the majority of it because I think it was probably the most uniquely produced episode of the show, in that it was all shot within those few sets that they had. But yeah, it was really interesting, and they talked about meeting with Dick Van Dyke to like get his input on what those those old productions were like, and it really felt like they put the time and effort to make it very authentic to that time period.
Yeah, and I was really impressed because I remember when we were talking about the episodes as they came out, we were like, did they get like the cameras they used from back then? Because so often, and I think you agree with me on this, so often with like all the movies we've had to watch through like college and stuff, when there's a filter to make something look old, it looks terrible, right? Like you can tell it's a filter. But in WandaVision, we were both pretty positive on how it looked, and like we were like, how did they do this? I wonder then if it really is just because they use those practical methods of production like authentically, and that's why it feels authentic. Because they did use filters for the visuals, like overlays, right? But it was
Right.
those sets, the effects, the costume design, like all that stuff was one to one with how it used to be done, and I think maybe that's why it feels so authentic that way.
The production design of the show is like top notch. There was one line I was looking for like the technology behind what they were doing. Someone did mention that they got some lenses, some like old lenses for shooting. So I imagine that probably played into like the 50s and 60s episode. But yeah, this was a cool little documentary. I was expecting a little bit more from it. I don't know what, but it was just nice. I always like to just hear a little behind the scenes, like what was this process actually like. So it was cool.
Yeah, one of my favorite, like there were a bunch of fun side stories too, like hearing Paul Bettany talk about, the meme that we've all been talking about recently of like, oh, he gets signed on to voice this AI, then becomes this robot man
Yeah.
that's died 3 times. Like, that was really fun. Hearing Elizabeth Olsen talk about her progression as Wanda was really nice. I One of my favorite things though, Catherine Hahn was talking about how she thought of Agnes like a blooming onion,
Yeah.
like from Chili's. I thought that was very funny. But one of the things that stood out to me was obviously the show had been impacted by COVID, and more recently, since the show wrapped, we've been hearing a lot of reports and conversations about how like the finale had to be changed a fair amount. Like there was more stuff with Ralph, there was more stuff with Monica. Benedict Cumberbatch was actually maybe supposed to be there as a cameo. Like I was surprised we didn't touch on COVID much, but again, like you've laid out why we probably wouldn't have, but I noticed like the 70s episode, I think when they were shooting that intro, they had masks on. So actually, I think I might have just answered this question for myself. I was gonna say, were they still shooting like only that episode in the 70s when COVID was happening? But like they probably just shot all the intros at the end of production.
Yeah, that could have been it.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing happened with The Mandalorian,
Mm-hmm.
where in that documentary for the second season, people were wearing masks when Rosario Dawson was on set. So like,
Yeah.
I think the shooting schedule is just so weird for productions. I never understand how that would work. So yeah, I think maybe those were not like reshoots, but like towards the end, like what you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
get like the meat and potatoes, and then just do that sort of stuff towards the end. So yeah, I do wish they would have talked about the challenges of the pandemic during this production, but I didn't necessarily. I I was hoping that they would talk about it, but I figured they probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like when I saw the mask, I was like, oh, it's coming. But like, no, not nothing. It's surprisingly less of a focus on Evan Peters as I was expecting. Also,
Yeah, I was
um,
I was hoping that Kevin Feige would talk about, and he wasn't in here at all. I don't think in a speaking role. Uh, I was hoping that they would talk about the sort of tease that they had with the audience, with
mhm.
knowing they would cast Evan Peters, but yeah, no discussion about that.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've been following any of those stories. Like I haven't looked in too deep recently, but I have seen a lot of posts about what was the original plan. The director of WandaVision talking about how things had to be changed for COVID. Like I do think that Phase 4 had to adapt, and I like how you led with it. I think this show had sort of an unfair amount of uh, attention on it because of that. But yeah, I'd be absolutely interested in hearing more about what that challenge was like.
Yeah, I know there was. I think there was a whole scene that was cut out of. I think like the kids and maybe Vision trying to get the Darkhold. That was just
Hmm.
not included in the final show. So yeah, there and I think there was speculation that Darcy, her role was minimized even further, especially in the last episode because of the production issues they ran into. So yeah, I would have liked to hear about that, but I wasn't expecting this documentary to be as candid as other types of documentaries.
Yeah, I think the shine, of course, was the production design because I think there's still a lot to mine there, right? And hearing the inspirations, like learning about the intro music and the theme songs, it was really really interesting, and we did get a lot of small fun information that we've covered. I didn't know that they had to for the black and white episodes they had to make Paul Bettany's makeup blue. That was funny.
Yeah, I saw the night before this aired a photo circulating around Twitter of him in the blue face. I'm like, oh, Dr. Manhattan. There he is.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I never knew that either. How like 50s sitcoms, like the women would wear like blue lipstick too, so it looks red on camera. That's very interesting. But
Yeah, and the director was, or I guess the showrunner was talking about the the painted walls in the kitchen, and I was looking at them like I don't remember these walls being that vibrant, but
yeah.
they made it that way obviously to show up better in black and white. So very interesting. It made me appreciate that episode a little bit more because I didn't dislike that episode at all, but it's not one of the standouts for me. But I do really appreciate the attention to detail that they just nailed, I think, with the studio audience, with the costumes, production design, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was nice to see.
Yeah, I guarantee that this show will be up for many Emmys when it comes to production design and all that.
Totally. You mentioned the music. I loved the story of the showrunner's like two friends that he knew, and he just called them up, and he was like, "Yeah, we're thinking of doing these like this decade hopping show," and they're like, "That's you got me." And it was just these two people doing like the intro music for each episode, and I thought that was really cool. I didn't expect these just seemingly these two random people to just hop on a piano and make the signature sound for WandaVision.
Yeah, lots of really interesting stuff on the production level, which I always appreciate, and I hope that moving forward, obviously, like, Falcon and the Winter Soldier is not going to have these layers of, like, oh, we had to replicate how television was done in the 50s, but I'm sure hearing how they adapt the Marvel Studios, cinematic approach to a limited series is also going to be very interesting, because they do touch on that slightly here, but Falcon and the Winter Soldier really is that, how Kevin Feige pitched it, like, it's a 6-hour Marvel movie, so curious to see how it turns out. But any final thoughts on Assembled for WandaVision?
I thought it was a good little insight into the production for WandaVision. I wish it was a little bit more candid, but I guess I shouldn't expect that going forward, just because I know that that's not what we're gonna get, especially with like COVID. I don't think they'll ever talk about that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to more little assembled episodes for each project. I don't think they've announced that they're going to do that for each one, but I have to imagine for a decent chunk going forward, they'll continue that trend.
Yeah, I also really hope that even if we don't get retrospective ones, that moving forward for Marvel Studios films, we would still get them.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a great way to have synergy, right? Like, oh, Black Widow drops in May. 2 weeks later, after 90% of the globe has seen it, check out the Assembled documentary about it, interviews with Scarlett Johansson about, what it was like finally getting her Black Widow movie and all that stuff. I think there's a really smart way to have that brand synergy that the MCU does so well,
Sure. And Disney Plus exclusive content.
Yeah. So, not that hard, just have an intern on set recording everything, and then he can just cut it together.
That's all you need.
Yeah. But, of course, WandaVision wrapped up. That was supposed to be a couple entries into the MCU Phase 4, but I believe the original intent to start Phase 4 was, of course, Black Widow, and then immediately after would have been Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is kicking off next week, Jack. How does that feel?
Those two are the two normie MCU projects.
Yeah.
It's wild. Like we're getting so much MCU content like week by week, right? Like it's not letting up for a while, and I think in part that is to make up for well, of course, the lost revenue that they didn't get from last year, but also just we didn't have any MCU stuff last year. So this is to make up for that. So it's great to be back. And I finished watching The Winter Soldier the other day, and I'm just instantly and very excited for a follow-up to that Captain America storyline, because I think that series of films is probably my favorite in the MCU.
Yeah, it's it's always hard picking favorites. Like I love the Spider-Man movies, I love the Guardians movies, but Cap I think is the most thoroughly solid through line. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, very excited to see this pick up next week because I love Falcon. Sam Wilson, since he was introduced, he's been like my favorite secondary character in the MCU, and I'm glad he's getting elevated to be a primary character here. I'm excited to see him go through that journey. And there were actually a couple quotes in the news this week, specifically with Marvel.com, of Kevin Feige talking about Anthony Mackie and Sam Wilson, which I'd like to throw out there before we get into some predictions for Falcon.
Please.
So, first off, in terms of how Anthony Mackie came into the MCU, Kevin Feige was mentioning that from memory, we just asked Anthony to play Sam, no audition. That's only happened a handful of times in the MCU.
That's
Which,
wild.
yeah, like I don't, I don't know who else would have done that. Like I think Favreau was like, I want RDJ, right?
Oh, probably. I mean, just think of his background and Tony Stark's background. You know,
Yeah.
like he, even if he wasn't asked to do that, like how Anthony Mackie was,
Hmm.
I think he is probably in that handful, right? That they consider essentially they just gave him that role.
Yeah, you'd assume, right?
Hmm.
Like I know John Krasinski was almost Steve Rogers. Well, even I know there's that everyone's like, oh yeah, Tom Cruise was almost Iron Man, but that might have been like a studio thing. But Favreau probably had his pick. So yeah, I thought that was very surprising because I love Anthony Mackie. I love him in that role, but kind of surprised. You know, they didn't audition Falcon. They just had a choice in mind.
Yeah, that's huge. I had no clue that was the situation with that character, but he
Hmm.
nails it. Again, I watched Winter Soldier the other day, and he's excellent in that role. And I really can't picture anyone else in that role, especially with the Sona line, "Hey Tic Tac."
Yeah, yeah. He's so great. I I wish we got like slightly more. I My biggest disappointment I think with Age of Ultron is just that he got shelved. You know, he was just like wasn't there for it.
Yeah, I found that really weird. Like,
Yeah,
because War Machine comes in towards the end at
yeah,
Sokovia. Falcon nowhere to be found.
yeah. Very strange.
Oh,
But
you know where he is? He's fighting Ant-Man.
yeah. Oh, you're right. That more important things to do.
Yeah,
But yeah, absolutely love Sam Wilson, Anthony Mackie. The
totally.
other quote that I found very interesting that I would like to preface our predictions with is Kevin Feige talking about the idea of Sam Wilson becoming Captain America. He had a lot to say, you know, about the comic origins recently of Sam Wilson getting the shield. But specifically, he said, quote, all along we've been asking, where did Falcon grow up? Who is his family? We want to know more about this guy being thrown into this situation and handling it spectacularly well, considering he's just a man. That's what the show is about. This man, this black man in particular, in the Marvel version of the world outside our window. So, I know you and I have talked about having lofty expectations for Marvel tackling the idea of what it means for a black man to become Captain America. And hearing Kevin Feige, you know, the guy, specifically like bring up that rhetoric the week before the show comes out, that makes me hopeful that hopefully our expectations will be met.
Yeah. This definitely makes me feel more assured in that kind of story that we're gonna get. Of course, this could just be Kevin Feige just saying that, and then what we actually get isn't necessarily a deep look into what it's like being a black man in the United States and what um, that representation for being Captain America as a black man means to people. I think we
Mm-hmm.
will because I'm more hopeful because of Black Panther and because of this line that he said, where I think they understand at this point that representation matters, right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad he did say this before the show, and it has me looking forward to a more complex sort of story than Marvel is known for. So, yeah, I'm hopeful for this one.
Yeah, and I think, you know, having a limited series gives you every opportunity to explore something on that level of complexity, again, just compared to what the MCU's done in the past. And I think specifically also, I've seen this conversation happen a lot too recently with Captain America and Steve Rogers in terms of like uh, propaganda and all that stuff. I think it's interesting seeing Steve's arc go being from someone who was like thrown into this role of literally being propaganda and then becoming sort of this, tangential being of patrolling the world and being a light for the globe in a way that I think inheriting that, specifically the name Captain America, for Sam Wilson, I think is an important story, and I think it's one that's very timely. And Anthony Mackie's also talked about what it was like, what this means for him and his children, and I hope that I'm not let down, because I also know that, like, I think a year ago, maybe around the summer when Black Lives Matter was really, in a really big swing. Anthony Mackie made some comments, around when John Boyega made some comments about how his experience was on productions, and Falcon and Winter Soldier went into production after that. So hopefully they saw this opportunity as an avenue to really flesh out Sam Wilson, talk about what it means to inherit Captain America as a title, and explore that in a meaningful way. And I don't think you get that out of a single movie in the MCU, but I think a show can absolutely handle that.
Sure. I think it'd be incredibly disrespectful if they did not touch on any of those topics throughout this, especially given the state of the world that we're in right now, in all the conversations that are just so constant that we're having. So I'm glad that Kevin Feige talked about that. I'm hoping they deliver on a meaningful story. And I feel like the MCU has been better with representation and diversity. Throughout like phase 1 and 2, I don't think they really had a good grasp on that and telling stories regarding like issues of race and gender. I think they're getting better with that. I think Black Panther was a home run. I think Captain Marvel was a decent. I mean, I guess I can't really speak to it, but I think it was a decent look at representation. I think they could probably go a little bit step further of what it means to be a woman and a woman hero in the MCU. But I think they're getting better. And I think Marvel is clearly capable of telling compelling stories that are more than just action blockbuster movies. So I'm glad that they are at least attempting to tell these kinds of stories.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to have that expectation also, because the comics do that all the time, right? Like in the 60s, Black Panther was created. That name was chosen because of the Black Panther movement, right? Like Marvel as a being has a history of like tackling rights like the or issues like this and civil rights and race and gender and sexuality. Like they cover that stuff in the comics. They have for a while to varying degrees of like success, but I think, this is one of the highest grossing film franchises of all time. We are reaching that point where they're getting more diverse. They're getting, they're doing more research. It's still not perfect, but they are working towards that. And I hope that, again, you see this character take on this role in a world where all of this is going on, and then within the MCU, they haven't really leaned into that much, right? Like Black Panther does cover some of those ideas, but there's every opportunity here, right? Like you're saying, I'm glad Kevin Feige said this.
Totally.
So, but as far as predictions go for the show, where's your head at right now? Do you have like a guess of what the overall story's going to be about? Like, are fans going to go too wild with it? Is this going to be more subtle because it's, standard Marvel fare? Where's your head at with all that stuff?
I have no clue what this project is going to be at all. Maybe even like the same way I knew nothing about WandaVision going into it. I know that Zemo is involved. I know that Falcon and the Winter Soldier in it, of course. I know that there is the government, maybe Captain America, that they've given the title to this random white dude.
Yeah, U.S. agent.
Exactly. And I try to stay away from like trailers and stuff. I saw something come up on my Twitter feed of Anthony Mackie's Falcon looking at the cap shield in like a glass case. I'm like, how'd that get there? Doesn't he have that? So I truly don't know where we're going for this and where we're going with this, and that has me very excited. I love going into movies and TV shows knowing next to nothing. So I'm eagerly anticipating what's coming. What about you? What do you think's gonna happen?
The government has like there's been plenty of Marvel movies where the government are the bad guys, right? The U.S. government specifically.
Oh yeah.
I think that potentially we can see a world where, and I've had this prediction for what this series is going to be since like they announced it, but the U.S. government hears that Steve Rogers passed on the title of Captain America to Sam Wilson. I think they're not happy about that, for a number of reasons, but you could play it in the angle of like, hey, no, we want our blonde-haired white guy, chiseled jaw, to be the face of America, right? And strip him of that title, and then, like, maybe he has a part of that, because I know Anthony Mackie's talked, at least on a fandom side, about, like, what the pressure of taking over Captain America means for him. So, like, I think we could see a parallel narrative there with, like, the real-world fandom aspect of this, as well as in-universe, the government not wanting this guy who was on the run with Steve Rogers. You know, Steve was already not in a good light with the government at the point of giving up the shield, but also the issues of race they could touch on, right? Like, I think that there's an opportunity there of like, hey, you're not who should have this shield. We want our guy to have it. Whether or not he's cool with that or whatever, like, I think we're going to be dealing with that aspect of it, and eventually as the series goes on, you know, we're going to see a point where Falcon's like, no, this is who I am. This is my next step as a man, as a hero. Like, I think that's probably the progression of the show, and Bucky's just there to help him out and, you know, be support, be his best friend, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of people look at Captain America and just think of him based off of his title alone, and think of him as like, people who like don't understand the character just think of him as like this representation of America, and he's just truth, justice, in the American way, essentially.
Right.
And is just sort of a one-note character. But I think the MCU really goes a long way of, like what you said, starting off as like the poster boy of the United States in the 1940s and being a dutiful soldier. And then essentially he was manipulated as a tool for S.H.I.E.L.D., a part of the government, in the Winter Soldier, and then he begins to develop his own ideals. And I like how by the end of his journey, he stands for what the ideals of America should stand for, but don't necessarily do stand for in the present.
Yeah.
So I think this show will probably tackle that with Falcon becoming Captain America and noting Steve's idealism and interpreting that into his character. And I think this will probably cement the idea of Captain America being that ideal character, where it's not, Captain America doesn't necessarily represent America today, it's what America should be. So I think we'll probably get that. Whereas, of course, we'll have the U.S. agent character who is just a tool for the government and will do whatever they say, blah, blah, blah.
The propaganda guy.
Exactly. So I think Anthony Mackie's character Captain America, the new Captain America, will just be a reiteration of, no, this is actually what the character stands for.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct. I think my one disappointment would maybe be if U.S. agent, this guy who, again, is supposed to be the United States government ideal guy to represent them, if it's like Zemo is the one pulling the strings on that front, so it's like, it's not really the U.S. that's the bad guys, it's just Zemo. Like, I do think, like, if you're going to tackle this story, you should tackle it in terms of, like, no, like, General Ross, the guy who's, like, you know, he's not Hydra, but, like, he's just that guy in the government that seems like that authoritative figure. He's like, no, not you, this white guy that is buff. It's like Hodge, right? In Captain America 1. It's like Tommy Lee Jones guy. He was like, hey, no, we want this guy. He's tough. He's built. He's the America guy.
Right.
I think if we echo that here and truly make it like, no, it's just a matter of image, that is much more interesting to me than like Zemo infiltrated the government. And like I think he will still be like, on the run. He's going to be the main bad guy, but there is that narrative and story of what it means for this person to take up this role. Hopefully will be the center point and really cement this as a great installment in the MCU.
Sure. As for plot, I have no clue where this is going. Like I don't know where the what the A to B thread is. I know you said before that you're hopeful this is more of a sequel to The Winter Soldier than Civil War ended up being.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still stand by that?
Yeah, because like I think with Civil War, it's like, oh, it's an Avengers .5 movie, and it's just Captain America. It has the most screen time. Like,
Yeah.
what I love about Captain America, because he's one of my favorite characters in the MCU, is what we were talking about of like his ideals, his agency to step away from the nations he's named after and really do what's right. Like, I think that's much more interesting, and we touch on that in Civil War, but it's more of like an internal conflict approach than anything else. Like, Winter Soldier literally is, hey, SHIELD, the US, you're all Nazis, right? Like, I gotta cut ties here. I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier could echo that in a different aspect, which we have been talking about today, and like how Kevin Feige's teeing this up to tackle these ideas in a way that the MCU hasn't before. And I think that's why I'm looking to this to be a Winter Soldier follow-up the way Civil War wasn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Civil War was definitely a Captain America-focused Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Which I love. I think it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, MCU projects. But I do, yeah, I totally get your point of that being not as much of a follow-up on what we got with Winter Soldier than we could have if it was just more of a standalone movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say also because Winter Soldier is like a thriller, and like
Totally.
I wouldn't call that like Civil War a thriller the way I could see this also on like more of a superficial genre level fill that void.
Yeah.
Too. What we're gonna say.
I loved the experimentation with WandaVision, and I'm not expecting that same level of experimentation, but I do like the idea of sort of the return to the comfort of the MCU, right? Like this I think is more of an MCU project that we know what to expect from it than we did with WandaVision. So I like both of those aspects, but I do like the idea of going back to sort of like MCU proper, So that has me excited.
Yeah, and hopefully it's a welcome return because back to back the next project is also Black Widow unless it gets pushed again, which I think also could on a more surface level fill that Winter Soldier follow up. But yeah, there's obviously going to be a lot to explore with Sam, Zemo coming back. That's going to be exciting. I think Sharon is in the show also, and like of course Bucky, right? Like seeing him, I think could also be interesting. Cope with what it's like to, sort of maybe fill in the gaps that we didn't get to see fully with Steve of like actually adjusting to being a person again, right? Because Steve, it happens in between the movies, and there's all those cut scenes from Avengers 1 of Steve like actually processing all this stuff, but maybe through Bucky's perspective because he did his little recovery in Wakanda and sort of reintegrating back into society, I think could be really interesting to follow for him as well.
Yeah, that's a good thread too. I think a lot of my focus from this was on Sam Wilson's character, but you're right, it is called Falcon and the Winter Soldier, so I imagine that billing means that we're going to have equal focus on both of those characters. So yeah, that's definitely a good expectation to look forward to. Also, I love their back and forth. I love the tension between the two. which I imagine will still be there. But I also have to imagine their friendship has been strengthened because of that shared. I don't want to say passing because I don't think Captain America's dead, but close to it
Yeah.
of their friend in Captain America. So yeah. Do you know that is Cap dead? Do you think we'll get an answer to that in this, or is the expectation that he probably just died a few months after Endgame?
I I don't know anything that happens in the show. I have my predictions. There's been imagery that might be construed as a funeral ceremony, potentially. So like, or it could just be Falcon in a suit. Like it could be either. But I think there's a chance that potentially Old Man Steve has passed.
What if that's like
And
the first thing we get in this show, and that's what kicks us off?
yeah, dude, like it intros on a news report or something, and then it's just like cuts to Sam and Bucky sitting on a couch together, just watching it, being like, "Damn, pretty sad, huh?"
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to see their back and forth, much like Wanda and Vision, that I think had shades of greatness, in their small time to shine in the MCU. I think, Sam and Bucky also have that those moments where they really shine, and I'm excited to see that blown up across presumably 6 hours. So,
Do you think we get? This might be a dumb question. Of course, WandaVision had each episode had its own theme song, but that was because of its homage to the decades. Do you think this show has its own intro, or is it just the MCU intro each episode?
I bet it has a combination of the Winter Soldier theme and the Captain America like fanfare.
Mm-hmm.
I bet that's what it is.
Yeah, I think we'll still get the MCU like title card each episode. But yeah, I would be that would be nice if we got that plus a little something extra for each episode, leading into each episode.
Yeah, I think it'd be very, very welcome. And of course, we're probably gonna get a post-credit scene. I don't know what it's gonna tee up because Black Widow was supposed to have come out already. I have no idea what they're gonna Eternals. I have no idea, but
Yeah, I'm not excited for Eternals. I got to see more of that to actually get my actual response to it, but that's something I'm not excited for.
yeah. But any final things you want to throw out there before we wrap up? Before we leave off and have to experience Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is another version of Steve gonna show up? Are we gonna get some flashbacks? What's any wild predictions before we sign off?
Nothing too wild. I know there's been reports that Chris Evans will like return for like a couple little things. I don't think I would not be surprised if we see him in a scene in this show. Like at all. That would not be surprising. But this show, I imagine, I have to imagine, is more of an action adventure project than WandaVision was. So I'm hoping that there's some compelling action in this in comparison to the sort of lackluster finale of WandaVision with those fights. I hope there's some interesting like choreography and stuff going on in this show.
Yeah, I have hopes for that as well. I think the show's gonna have a lot of cliffhangers because I think it could be an instance of it's just a chapter every week, the way WandaVision kind of wasn't. Like WandaVision did feel very separate most weeks until the end.
Yeah.
I think this could be like broken up like a comic book or something where it's like, oh, big tense moment, cut to credits, we'll see you next week, and then immediately the next episode picks up where we left off. I think that it might be the way they hook the week to week sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good call. Somewhat similar to The Mandalorian, I suppose. Although I would say probably more focused than that show was.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this you could just sit down and it literally is a just through line. I don't think we're gonna be jumping much. I think it could very much be like picking it up and putting it down pretty much every week.
Yeah, totally. Do we have a number of episodes for this show?
I believe it is 6.
Oh, okay. That's a lot shorter than I expected.
I could be wrong. I think it's 6, but I think they're longer episodes.
That would make sense then.
So, yeah, because this is less weird and it's more typical Marvel, I think we could, settle into maybe 40-minute episodes every week.
Sure.
Or something like that. But yeah, anything else you want to say before we sign off, Jack?
I'm excited. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. Well, where can the agents of Excelsior find you?
Sure, you can follow me on social media at FascinatedJack. Christian and I have our Pokemon podcast. It's called My First Mon. We're playing through Pokemon Emerald. We're approaching the Elite Four. I am about to fight the Elite Four. So by next week, you can hear my reactions to that on YouTube, JoyClicks, or podcast services. How about you, Christian?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok at Shun2D2. Lots of Marvel stuff on all those avenues. Next week, we'll be back with a lot of Marvel stuff. We're going to be talking about that event. We're going to be talking about Hawkeye, the next-gen version, and the first episode of Falcon, so buckle up. This show is available on youtube.com/joyclicks if you want the video version under the Excelsior podcast playlist. And, of course, podcast services, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify if you enjoy it on your platform of choice, because there's a bunch of them, and you can rate or review on that platform. It would be greatly appreciated. It is very helpful to us. It takes just a second if you enjoy the conversation. If you want to get involved further, patreon.com/joyclicks, the $1 and $5 tiers. $5 tier gets you producer credit on all of our podcasts, including this one, like Chris Sakis and Aaron Easton. So thank you very much. And just to put it out there, I did a fact check. 6 episodes. Each of them will run for about 40 to 50 minutes, according to Kevin Feige.
Sounds good.
So, yeah, there's going to be a lot next week. So I'm excited. Marvel's back. And until then, Excelsior.
Excelsior.